Thank you for joining us today for another edition of Conversations with AARP in the Virgin Islands. I'm Troy Deshabert-Schuster, State Director for AARP in this territory. As the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people to choose how they live as they age, AARP policy makes certain that issues that matter most to families remain top of mind priorities for our elected officials. AARP is particularly concerned with the long term financial resilience of all Americans. It is estimated that over half of the nation's households are at risk of not having enough money to maintain their standard of living in retirement and being unable to afford necessities such as food, housing, and healthcare. Although some individuals are merely not saving enough, a vast number are not saving at all. Nearly 60% of households have no assets saved for retirement. This trend is consistent among groups of people who lack access to employer sponsored retirement plans. The retirement crisis in this country has reached a pivotal point. Without significant reforms, many states will face an economic collapse. To better gauge the retirement readiness of Virgin Islanders, AARP in the Virgin Islands commissioned the 2022 Virgin Islands Retirement Savings Options to explore and measure residents' opinion on creating a public-private managed retirement savings program in the Virgin Islands. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Jessica Ekman, and Jessica is the Government Affairs Director at AARP's Financial Security and Livable Communities Division. And Jessica will be helping me to examine the research findings and to provide an understanding of a retirement savings program designed to help Virgin Islanders take advantage of their financial future. Jessica, welcome.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you. Every once in a while, I have one of my national colleagues on. When we say a national colleague for our listening audience, we mean a colleague who works in our national office, in our national headquarters in Washington, D.C., and that is where Jessica is based. That's where she performs most of her duties in our national office. So again, Jessica, great to have you, one of my national colleagues, join us today.
It's always great to join our state offices.
Great. And so you have helped us to do this great body of research here in the Virgin Islands across the territory. And as we were conducting this research, we were particularly interested in non-government employees. As most of our listening and viewing audience knows, here in the Virgin Islands, we have GERS, the Government Employee Retirement System. And that is the manager of the pension program for government employees. However, we're looking at this particular time at non-government employees, recognizing that a lot of non-government employers, especially smaller businesses, don't have retirement plans in place. They don't have a pension program. They may not have a 401k available to their employees. And so we were very interested in what people are thinking here in the Virgin Islands, those who are not working for the government, and that was the focus. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit of what you do in the national office in particular. What is your job there?
Sure. So I work in our government affairs team at the AARP National Office based in Washington, D.C., but I myself am based in Colorado. And my focus is on financial security. So that includes a few different issues, but the primary focus is really retirement savings. I have the privilege of working closely with all of our 53 state offices around the country as you all do the hard work of ensuring that everyone does have the ability to choose how they live as they age. So, something that we work on a lot around the country is what we call work and save programs. And I don't know if now is the right time. I'm happy to give a quick overview of sort of like what is a work and save program and what does this mean for folks?
Yes, please do.
So we call them work and save programs, and these programs are public-private partnerships, right? So the state sort of it plays a more minimized role. It's nothing like a public pension system or anything like that. So the state serves as the aggregator of businesses, generally small businesses, those who don't already offer a way to save at work. And then the private sector runs all the investments. These programs are really designed to give access to many more workers than currently have it, and to do so in a really cost-effective and easy-to-use way. So it gives folks that have never saved generally a way to grow the savings that they need to prepare for the future. It's their own money. They can take it with them from job to job. They can rely on it for a more secure future. They're easy for employers and for employees to use, and there are no ongoing costs or risks to employees or to the state, to employers or to the state, excuse me. And just very quickly, the most common model that we see is the automatic IRA. So in this kind of a model, employers of varying sizes, depending on the legislation passed, they're required to offer the program to their employees. And all the employer really needs to do is provide an information packet that's already provided to them by the program to their employees. And then they just run payroll deductions. It's free for employers, it's low cost to employees, and it saves the state, saves the territory money. These programs are always voluntary for employees. They've got full control over whether they participate, how much they want to contribute to those accounts, and investment choices as well. Automatic enrollment and portability are sort of key features that are best practices in the industry, and 16 states have already enacted work and save programs so far. So it's just picking up momentum as time goes on.
Yes. And again, as we mentioned earlier in the show, that a lot of small employers, like we see a lot of those here in the Virgin Islands, don't offer these programs. So what we did here in the Virgin Islands is we took a survey of persons between the age of 25 and 64 who are registered voters and not working for the VI government. And we asked them several questions regarding how ready they feel for retirement. Have they planned for retirement? Have they been saving? How concerned are they about all of this, etc. And the data points are really quite interesting, and I'll share that now, some of them with our listening and viewing audience. So 94% of all voters surveyed agree that the Virgin Islands policymakers should support legislation that makes it easier for workers to save for retirement. So again, even going beyond their employer, but looking to elected officials to come up with legislation, to develop policy, to develop laws that makes it easier for all of them to save for retirement. Again, that's 94%. So that shows that there's a real gap in our policy right now here in the Virgin Islands. 88% believe it's very important to be able to save for retirement at work. So not only looking toward policy and toward laws, but also looking toward their employers to make it easier or to facilitate their savings for retirement at work. 91% of workers without access to a workplace savings program would take advantage of a program if one were available to them. So again, looking at workers who work on a job where there is no access to a savings program, 91% of them said that if the program were available to them, they would take advantage of it. 68% feel anxious about having enough money for retirement. So the vast majority feel very, very anxious about having enough money for retirement. And we can understand that, especially as inflation is taking place now. I'm sure that some people felt on track towards savings to retirement, and now inflation has taken off astronomically, and so that's causing even more anxiety. And it would be interesting if the survey were taken today, because this survey was completed just when inflation was really picking up, but now it's reaching an all-time high. So I would think that those numbers would be even higher if it were done today. And 600 interviewers within the Virgin Islands are registered voters. So of we interviewed 607 people who are registered voters in the Virgin Islands. So those numbers are really, really interesting. And there's a lot of work to be done here in the Virgin Islands regarding developing programs to enable people to save for retirement. And that is what AARP is concerned about. And that's why we did this research. That's why we're bringing this information to you and hoping that all of you, even if you do work for the government of the Virgin Islands, that you will help us and join us in this fight for a policy change, right? Because even if you work for the government of the Virgin Islands, maybe your spouse doesn't work for the government of the Virgin Islands. Maybe one of your offspring is not working for the government of the Virgin Islands or some other close relative. So thinking expansively, not just about your financial security in particular, and thinking, well, it's all fine. I have paid into GERS, paying into it every month, but thinking about your family in general. So, so Jessica, what are your thoughts on those survey results?
Yeah, I think those are really interesting numbers, and it really does track with what we see around the country. We do registered voter surveys around the country as well as small business owner surveys, and it really does track. We consistently get very high numbers for all of these results, right? For people that are eager to find a way to save for retirement at work and thinking that policymakers need to find a way to help them and support them, making it easier for them to save for retirement. Most people tend to feel pretty anxious about having enough money for retirement. I think the inflation point was a very good one, Troy. And I think that a lot of people do tend to put it off a little bit. I know certainly many younger folks do tend to put this off until later. And that's much easier to do. It's much easier to put it off when your money isn't being automatically deducted from your paycheck. And that's a shame. But even when you're decades into a career, just putting a little bit of money away each paycheck makes a huge, huge difference and can really make a dramatic difference in your quality of life down the line.
Mhm. Talking about putting away just a little bit, a lot of people think about simply putting the money in a savings account or in a checking account, and the interest rates there are very, very, very low. But there's so many other financial instruments that are available through financial investment institutions such as uh, IRAs or through an employer 401k or even just direct investments in mutual funds and so forth. And it's really important to look into that because you can get much higher interest rates and then the interest will compound much faster, right? And before you know it, you have a lot more money saved than you had even put in or than you even expected to save. So,
That's exactly right. And that's something that we see. A lot of industry best practices are really that automatic enrollment, automatic deduction, your contributions just sort of get taken right out of your paycheck and thrown in. And of course, you're able to stop that or change that contribution level at any time. But not seeing it and having to consciously make the decision yourself to put it away, it makes it much harder to save if you don't have access to that automatic payroll deduction savings option. And many people just don't. And you can see why, right? I mean, small businesses have a lot to do. They don't want to have to figure out how to run a retirement plan. They don't want to have to pay for it. They incur liability when they open up a retirement plan for their employees. So a lot of small business owners just aren't able to offer access to something like that. And that's where Work and Save really steps in and can make a huge difference.
I have a little story to share. It just popped back into my memory. I knew this lady who lived on St. Thomas here in the Virgin Islands, and she's no longer with us. She has transitioned to the next life. But when I met her, she was already well in her 80s, and she was a woman of significant financial means. And she and her husband had been teachers. They were teaching elementary school and high school and not making much money. Back in those days when they were actively working and teaching, GERS, this government employee retirement system, wasn't as it is today. And I asked her one day, how did you acquire or amass so much wealth? And she said that every time she got paid, she paid herself first. And I thought, well, that's interesting. It's your paycheck, right? So you're getting paid. So how do you pay yourself first after you receive your paycheck? And she explained to me that she took a large chunk of that money, and it wasn't a lot of money they were making, but she took a significant portion of it right off the top and put that into financial investments. And that is how she paid herself. And over the years, she increased the savings and the interest compounded. And again, she became a person of significant wealth by the time she retired. And that continued on through. And then, of course, she made some other investments in real estate and so forth along the way. But again, all as a result of paying herself first, taking
I
that
think
money and
that's an
putting it aside
excellent
first.
way to build wealth and an excellent way to save for retirement. And I think that most people recognize that and they see that as a good pathway, but it's just so hard to do oftentimes, particularly with lower income individuals. They might think, I'm just barely getting by. I'm hit by inflation. It's very difficult for me to put any money away. But we've seen in states that have this kind of program up and running already, that many savers, many of them lower income savers who really haven't had a way to save in the past at all for retirement, are able to put just a little bit of money away each month, and it's adding up very quickly. And it's something where, I would never encourage anyone to use a retirement account as an emergency fund.
Mhm.
But, things happen. We've seen over the last few years, crazy things can happen. And these are typically set up to be Roth IRA accounts. So they're post-tax, right? So the state government gets their taxes up front, which is great. But the benefit to a saver is that those taxes have been paid. You can take your contributions out penalty free. And it's something where, again, want to make a huge caveat here and say, please don't treat your retirement savings account as an emergency fund. But if you need to dip into it, you are able to do that without penalty, because it's difficult to see, during the pandemic. I know that there were folks who had to dip into their retirement accounts to pay for things, and they weren't able to do that penalty free. They were penalized for that. So knowing that you have some money saved that you otherwise would not have had saved can make a huge difference day to day, and ideally long term for retirement as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, in your work with AARP across the country, because while you work in the national office, or you say you're based in Colorado, but your work is pretty much the national office, nonetheless, you work with all the state offices across the country.
Mhm.
And so, can you give us a couple examples of policy changes that you're seeing that AARP is advocating for with regard to work and save across the country?
Yeah, so there's some interesting things going on with Work and Save right now. So we have, like I mentioned, there are 16 states that have enacted. Just last Thursday, the 16th state was signed into law. They've enacted some kind of Work and Save program, and they vary state by state slightly. There are different variations. The automatic IRA is sort of the gold standard, and it's also the most common form. Something interesting that we're seeing developing, and we're sort of trying to fully flesh out a little bit, is the idea of collaboration between states, right? So if you have a state that's potentially a smaller population of savers, but you want to get those economies of scale up so that you can keep fees low for everyone, how do you do that in a smaller state? And what we're seeing is these partnerships are starting to form. They're sort of starting to coalesce. Different states are talking to one another. Colorado and New Mexico, who both have separate work and save programs enacted into law that are not yet up and running, have signed an informal agreement to begin working together. And so each state can kind of brand it as its own work and save program, but it's one pot of money, one pot of savers. And that's something that we haven't really seen play out yet, but a lot of states are interested in that. And you can see why, right? Because it just creates ease, it creates simplicity. It also just makes sure that you're able to keep those fees low, which is important for savers and also for the state to earn their money back. So it's, there are some very, very interesting things. I'm eager to see how these play out, but it's something that many, many states are talking to each other about, and we are certainly encouraging states to put that in their legislation to at least have that option down the road.
Okay, so this is like a consortium of states
Yes.
coming together and forming a pension plan for non-government employees, essentially, right?
Yes. And it's you use pension plan, and I understand how you're using it, but just to be very clear, it's not a pension plan.
Okay, okay, got
But it is a collaboration, right? It's a consortium of states. It's similar to how certain states have grouped up to offer ABLE accounts, a savings program. So there's sort of one state that may be the hub. They're sort of running a lot of the back of the house kind of administrative tasks, but they have an investment manager that they use together. They have program administrator that they use together. So it's a little simpler, cheaper. No need to reinvent the wheel when we've already done this. And it's
it.
something that a lot of states, the state that I just mentioned that signed the bill into law last week was Delaware. They're not a huge state. They don't have an enormous population of savers. They're very interested. I know that they're in talks with Colorado and other states to chat through how that might work and what a partnership might look like. So it's very interesting, and I'm very excited to see how that plays out. But I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think it's going to be something that we're going to see play out more fully over the next few years.
That is very interesting. And as you're talking, I was thinking about Puerto Rico, right next door to us here. And we share so many of the same opportunities and same challenges between the two territories. And it would be really fascinating to explore the possibilities with Puerto Rico of forming this type of consortium relationship.
Absolutely.
And so, what about financial literacy? Can't we just educate people on the importance of retirement savings, or do we need to educate and provide the tools?
I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I think that education is important, but it needs to be education and the tool, right? So financial literacy it's a helpful tool, but realistically, it's been around for decades, right? Financial literacy programs have been around for decades, and they haven't really moved the needle on their own. So the key is really access to savings at work. People are 15 times more likely to save if they can do so out of their regular paycheck at work. So having a way to save at work is really the key. And that's where Work and Save is able to sort of step in and provide that easy, low-cost way for workers to save their own money. So we're certainly supportive of financial literacy programs. That's written into some of the legislation that we see around the country, but it's not enough on its own to make a dramatic difference.
Right. And here at AARP in the Virgin Islands, we do offer financial literacy workshops, and they have been quite successful, and we're happy that people are coming and participating, but we're really hoping that people are actually saving, right? Because you can attend the workshops every year, attend every single one of them, but if you're not making use of it and actually saving, then it amounts to nothing. And you're absolutely right. When the employer provides the opportunity, it does make it so much easier.
So
And
much easier. And we see that around the country. Every state, every population runs into this. And it tends to be folks that work for smaller employers, like we talked about. It's just, you want to make sure that people have that easy way to save for retirement at work. They want to, they just need you to streamline it a little bit for them.
and one thing that AARP did for us that I was very pleased with, and I'm sure that you are as well. Not only do we have mechanisms to save, with paycheck deductions right off the top toward a 401k, but also recently AARP started an emergency savings program, or a savings program for emergencies, right? Because as you mentioned earlier, some people end up dipping in to their retirement savings to take care of a present emergency, some medical need, some other need to repair a home after a storm or after some kind of natural disaster, et cetera. but it's important to have an emergency savings as well, because i- if you have an emergency, it's quite easy to make a big dent in your retirement savings, and then what happens later on when you actually have to retire, right?
Absolutely.
So you can end up like chasing your tail like a dog in a circle if you don't plan for the savings, for the emergencies also, right? So
Right, exactly. And you lose out on a lot of that compound interest if you're dipping into retirement too early.
exactly. And to change our mindset, it's so easy to get into the mindset of thinking, okay, the next payday, I'm going to buy this for myself. Or the next paycheck I get, I'm going to do this for myself. And we spend our paycheck before we even get it, right? So many people do that. And then they get paid, let's say on a Friday, and by a Monday, a big portion of the paycheck has been spent on nonsense.
Exactly.
That's not preparing them for an emergency or not preparing them for retirement. So again, like this dear old lady in St. Thomas told me once upon a time, pay yourself first. And that's not to pay yourself with material items and fun stuff, but to pay yourself toward your retirement. And it's
Absolutely.
very important.
Yep.
And I look forward to us developing more policy here in the Virgin Islands. So, again, for our listening and viewing audience, this research is not an end in itself. It is the means toward a greater and more permanent change here in the Virgin Islands. And so we're going to be sharing this information with the public, sharing this information with elected officials, using it as fuel for our advocacy to bring about a greater opportunities for Virgin Islanders to save. Over the years, AARP in the Virgin Islands have been more focused on the government employee retirement system, but now we're changing our focus a little bit. So, Jessica, any final words in our last minute?
I just want to say thank you so much for having me. This is such an important topic, and I love to see our state offices so eager and enthusiastic about this. And AARP is a wonderful resource. We do this all over the country. So if anyone has any questions, we're always more than happy to help.
Great. And we can always look toward aarp.org, our website. There's lots and lots of information there about planning for retirement, lots of tools. So please do check out aarp.org. And we encourage you also to become a member and to log into aarp.org with your membership information and open the doors to even more tools, more opportunities that AARP presents. So again, Jessica, thanks so much for joining us today on this show. And we look forward to having you on a future show with us as we get further into the development of policy here in the Virgin Islands.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.